Hi, my name's Phil. I like to talk about politics. And so in a week where the two contenders to become our next Prime Minister went head-to-head in a TV debate, the biggest news of the week was the resignation of Sir Kim Darroch, who is the UK ambassador to the US. Here's a photo of him meeting President Trump, a man who claims to have never met him before. It's not even the first photo to surface this year, is it, of Trump being with someone he claims never to have met. But there you are. Anyway, the Prime Minister yesterday, Theresa May, yes, she is still the Prime Minister, expressed regret at his resignation and noted that the entire Cabinet had publicly supported him after Trump's hissy fit. Of course, none of the Cabinet were in a position to resolve the situation if Boris Johnson becomes Prime Minister in 2 weeks. Last night, Boris Johnson was asked repeatedly by Jeremy Hunt to offer his support to the UK ambassador to the United States, and he refused to do so. No surprise there, as Johnson is basically a Trump mini-me, but it made the ambassador's position completely untenable. With Trump refusing to deal with him, then he couldn't really carry out his duties, and he obviously felt that it would be less embarrassing for Britain if he resigned out of choice than created a situation where the next Prime Minister sacked him on a clear order from the head of government of another nation. And I have to say, I don't believe he was right to resign, but I do understand why he did it. And his reason for resigning was absolutely because Boris Johnson refused to back him. The memos coming to light was embarrassing, but there was nothing in them that wouldn't have been in memos from ambassadors around the world from all sorts of countries. Everyone knew Sir Kim was not at fault, not least of which the ambassador himself, but he also knew that it would be less embarrassing for the country if he resigned, as I say, rather than be sacked by the Prime Minister on the orders of the US President. Both Theresa May and Jeremy Corbyn made it clear that they did not feel he should have to resign. They gave him their full backing and that he was a loyal public servant. In fact, it's hard to imagine anyone other than Johnson who could credibly become Prime Minister that would have failed to back Sir Kim fully. Once the resignation had come through, though, all of a sudden Boris Johnson felt he could support the ambassador now, that it would no longer be a test of his non-existent leadership. He knows that even amongst the swivel-eyed loons you see that are electing him, there is disdain for the notion of sacrificing a senior civil servant in order to capitulate to the demands of a foreign power, whoever that foreign power may be. Even they know it is not taking back control, it's giving it away. There has been no shortage of government ministers, especially from the Foreign Office as you'd expect, attacking Boris Johnson for the humiliation he has now delivered upon the UK before he's even been given the keys to number 10. Imagine what he's going to do afterwards. One such minister, Sir Alan Duncan, called Johnson spineless. He said it represented a failure of leadership, and he said Johnson had thrown Sir Kim under a bus for his own personal ambition. I'm not quite sure which bus he meant. Was it the Brexit bus, or was it that bus that Boris Johnson reckons he makes out of wine crates? I don't know. But this is the key. It is craven, and it is the furthest thing from leadership that you can possibly imagine. We are about to get a Prime Minister that will exhibit no leadership on the world stage. That is clear. We are already in a weakened position globally due to Brexit, and now we have a leader who won't even put up a token defence for our beleaguered island. And the fact that Boris Johnson, after the resignation, had the nerve, the audacity to telephone Sir Kim to express his sadness at that is the most sickening aspect of the entire episode. Ringing him up to say, "Oh, I'm terribly sorry you resigned there." An honourable public servant has fallen on his sword for the sake of this gutless bully, and now he's been made to make polite conversation to Johnson on the phone, no doubt graciously accepting his pretence of sorrow. I know what I'd have said to Johnson, but I doubt Sir Kim, a seasoned diplomat, would have responded in anything like such a manner. And what is quite remarkable about this episode is that you don't really see any other senior MP doing anything other than backing our former ambassador to the hilt. It didn't matter whether they are Conservative, Labour, SNP or a Liberal Democrat. Support for Sir Keir has been universal, with the only exception being Boris Johnson. But unfortunately, Boris Johnson is the one person who could be able to make a decision in a couple of weeks regarding it. The man who thinks he's going to lead our country was the only one who couldn't carry out, frankly, this simplest of all leadership tasks. But with this resignation, there is now a fear, a real fear. Donald Trump has got his way. He demanded that our ambassador be removed from his post, and so he has been. Donald Trump knows 100% this is because he demanded it. If it wasn't apparent before, he knows that the UK is his bitch. And what has Donald Trump frequently said about the sort of person that should be the UK ambassador to the US? He doesn't want experienced civil servants. He doesn't want diplomats. He doesn't use them himself. He wants businessmen and businesswomen. He wants Nigel Farage to be our ambassador in Washington. But at least he wants someone of that ilk. There is a very serious fear that Boris Johnson might acquiesce to that. As such, Theresa May seems to feel that she needs to replace Kim very quickly indeed in her remaining days as Prime Minister. With a new ambassador in post, Johnson won't be able to give Trump what he wants, at least not until the next memo leak. In fact, if the source of the leak is never identified, you do have to wonder if the next ambassador will be writing their reports with some trepidation. After all, if the next ambassador is sacked or forced to resign on Boris Johnson's watch whilst Trump is still president, then we may indeed end up with a Brexiteer businessman representing us in America. Makes you shudder. And this is not the end of the matter either. This is basically our likely next Prime Minister sacrificing a senior public servant. Now, our civil servants need and expect full support from their political masters in order to carry out their very difficult and incredibly delicate diplomatic and administrative tasks. They stick their neck out on the line in a way that cannot be done without trusting their ministers. Sir Kim did not receive the support he needed, and it has hit the whole Foreign Office, if not the whole of Whitehall. So much so, this is so serious that a large meeting was held today, chaired by a senior official in the Foreign Office, in order to acknowledge the very worrying situation all of those civil servants face now, and trying to allay fears that they may have. The Foreign Office Minister I just spoke about, Sir Alan Duncan, he attended the meeting, and later on he described how Boris Johnson, after his own disastrous time as Foreign Secretary, was already considered in fairly low terms in the Foreign Office, and now their estimation of him, if anything, has diminished still further. And this is at a time when the UK desperately needs to repair its standing in the world and will need the civil servants of the Foreign Office to do that. Boris Johnson has deeply concerned them and completely lost their trust. What might at first glance just seem like the story of an innocent man being hung out to dry, which is bad enough, is actually the story of very likely harm going to come to our country. This is why the story is so big. This is why it's a huge deal. I cannot overstate the importance of the damage done. First by whoever leaks the memo, but worst of all, by the cowardly cretin who is about to take over the helm of the USS United Kingdom as we steer through the most difficult and dangerous time in her history. If the civil servants cannot trust that they're not going to be hung out to dry when they are doing things that require the trust of their ministers, and especially their Prime Minister, they will not be able to work effectively. And that is the bottom line. This is very, very serious. But anyway, it's done. It's done, and no doubt it will get worse with Boris Johnson as Prime Minister. We'll just have to wait and see. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, don't forget to click the like button, subscribe for further content, and until next time, I'll see you later.